All right, everyone. Welcome to our third Lunch and Learn. Today, we're going to talk about a lot of different topics, including our legal system and the justice system and reporting domestic violence as it relates, and then different considerations for the Hispanic population. So today, I have two really awesome people with us. Lindsay, if you'd like to introduce yourself and tell us your role at the agency, I'd really appreciate it.
Yeah, so my name's Lindsay. I'm a legal advocate here at the Violence Prevention Center. I've been in this position a little over 4 years now. So I help with survivors who file for orders of protection at the courthouse, and I support them through the divorce process and custody, visitation, different types of family issues. And I also specialize in working with survivors in criminal cases. So when there are criminal charges pending against an abusive person, I support them in that process and help them navigate the criminal justice system.
Yeah, and then we also have with us today, Kaylin. Kaylin, would you take a minute to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Kaylin. I'm also a legal advocate on our team with Lindsay. I've been at Violence Prevention Center for a little bit over a year now, and I am the bilingual advocate that works with the Hispanic population. Primarily, I help English speaking as well, but I specialize in helping the Hispanic population file for orders of protection in court if they need to, if they need other kinds of legal avenues with immigration or something like that. I assist a little bit with that. And I also do community outreach where I do healthy relationships presentations in English and Spanish all over St. Clair County.
Awesome. And if you have been watching any of these other Lunch and Learns, you might already know that October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And this Domestic Violence Awareness Month looks a little bit different because of the pandemic. But we still want to make sure that we are raising awareness around domestic violence, doing some myth busting, and really just continuing to grow our community's knowledge about domestic violence. So with that, I think we'll just get right into it. One of the major problems we have, or what we hear the most, is that survivors again and again aren't sure if they will be believed, if they report, maybe, so there's a lot of fear around that. Lindsay, can you talk a little bit about how that happens and what we can do about it?
Yeah, unfortunately, in the society that we live in, there is this idea that survivors may not be believed. And it could just be a feeling that people have, but it could be that a survivor has shared their story with someone and they were not believed before. But I just want to emphasize that at the Violence Prevention Center, and especially on our team with me and Kaylin, we will believe you. We always believe survivors of violence. And one of my main focuses as an advocate is helping that survivor share their story with judges and police officers and the state attorney so that they are believed and taken seriously in those different agencies.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. And so if you have that fear, but maybe you're, still experiencing domestic violence or some sort of abuse, where do you even begin just telling people about the abuse? How do you even start that?
Well, everybody reacts to abuse differently, and everybody's situation is different, as well as their support system is different. If, the person you trust most that you feel like you could tell is, your best friend, your parent, your sibling, that's really great that you have that person to trust and trust with your story and your situation. Some people, you tell a coworker who's completely outside of that situation, or even a neighbor, especially during these times when we're at home a lot more often and things can happen a lot more quickly when you're at home longer. Working out a safety plan with your neighbor as well is great. Sometimes you don't have that support system with any of those people because abusers will try to eliminate every source of support that you might be able to have in there. So even if you don't have anyone like that, we have a 24-hour hotline that you can always call, and we're always going to be a support system for you. If you're in that situation, you can start with calling us just to tell someone what's going on. You don't have to do anything else. We can just listen to you and believe you and be that support for you.
Yeah, and so we've talked a lot in these previous sessions about how maybe the media or Hollywood portrays domestic violence just a little differently than sometimes it is in real life, right? Like, it's not always bruises or physical abuse, and so a lot of people don't come forward because maybe they don't think that that is real abuse or that it's a crime. Or how can we help encourage people that are maybe not in a physically abusive situation to still come forward?
That is something that I will say I've seen happen so much with my clients over the years is people think that just because there's not a bruise or a mark left physically on your skin, that it's not abuse. And unfortunately, physical abuse is just one tiny piece of the pie when it comes to unhealthy and abusive behaviors. There's stalking, there's controlling, like Kaylin said, isolating, keeping you from your friends and family, threatening you, intimidating your children. And I think in many cases, the worst aspect of abuse is the emotional abuse, because a bruise can heal in a few days, but the emotional scars left behind by some of the words that people say linger. And so I really want to emphasize that the Violence Prevention Center has counseling as well as our legal team, just because we recognize all these different types of abuse that occur. And I think one of the best ways to get started for those people who are kind of like, is this abuse? Is it not? Is just to give us a call and talk to us, or come up to the courthouse and talk to us, and we will help go over with you what you're experiencing and what you want to classify it as.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point. Like, you don't have to have all the answers before you reach out for help. We can help navigate you through your options. So I think a lot of us know words like order of protection or restraining order or those kind of things, but can you just walk through just a little piece of what that process is? What is an order of protection? How does it help a survivor?
Yeah, orders of protection can be filed in the courthouse with the assistance of anyone on the legal advocacy team, because we're there every day, Monday through Friday. You know, we're open at 8:30. You can come in if you're feeling unsafe, if you have experienced abuse that you feel you need to be protected from. We can help you fill out that paperwork. Then we'll turn it in, and you see the judge that afternoon, and you just tell her your story and why you feel you need to be protected. And if that's granted, you know, it'll keep them 500 feet away from you, 500 feet away from your children or any other protected parties you might have, 500 feet away from your residence, and they're not allowed to call you. I tell my clients, you know, he's not allowed to call you, text you, he can't message you on Facebook, he cannot have any contact with you, and it gives them a huge peace of mind to have that protection with them. And so it is kind of an all-day thing, and it's good to talk to the judge about your situation because she cares. She really does want you to be safe, and she wants to know your situation to be able to get the order to protect you to the best of its ability.
Mm-hmm. You know, I hear a lot of times when just out and about or from friends that, like, sometimes a restraining order or an order of protection is just a piece of paper, and then it can make your abuser more angry and put you in like more danger. Lindsay, how do you respond to people that say those things?
Yeah, I hear that concern from, like you said, there's just people who have that perception, but even our survivors sometimes have that belief that, you know, if I get this protective order, it's only going to make things worse. And I just want to say, I trust people. You know, I think one big thing to do before you file anything is to think about your options, get informed about the options available to you, and talk to one of us about different avenues that we can take. Orders of protection are one way to help people keep people safe, but it's certainly not the only way to help keep people safe. But at the same time, I want to emphasize that orders of protection are not just pieces of paper. The difference between an order of protection and any other type of piece of paper is that it's police enforceable. That means that if you call 911 and your ex-partner is at your house knocking on your door, the police are going to come. They're not going to wonder if you invited him. They're not going to wonder why he's there. The fact of the matter is he's violating that court order. They're going to arrest him and take him to jail. And there could be criminal consequences for violating that order. Mm-hmm. And that could give you a 24-hour, 48-hour window of safety that lets you get to a safer place or plan your next move. So I do think that they're life-saving pieces of paper in many cases.
Yeah, and so, you know, we talked a little bit earlier about what if your abuse wasn't physical or you know, it was emotional or financial or some of the other types of abuse. Does an order of protection really help in those situations? Like, how does it piece together to help stop abuse?
It does stop from, you know, letting them get near you or letting them contact you. There are remedies, you know, that are in the order that say things about like property. I know a lot of clients are always like, well, he's destroying all my things, or they're going to take my stuff. And there's actually remedies on the paperwork that say, you know, the victim gets possession of these things. The abuser gets possession of these things if, you know, when they leave, and the abuser can't damage, take, steal, you know, any personal property that belongs to them. So that helps a lot with them. Lindsay, what about some other remedies?
I think that one thing to keep in mind is that even on the order of protection, it's not just to prevent physical abuse. That is one component, but it also prevents that person from stalking you, monitoring or surveilling your behavior, harassing you, intimidating you, texting you constantly. So even through the order of protection, like you said, Melissa, it's not just physical. There's a recognition that there's a variety of behaviors that people use to control and abuse others, and the order can put a stop to a lot of those.
That's awesome. So I think another big myth out there, and maybe just a feeling of survivors in general, is that they are powerless or that they're unprotected. And truthfully, like here in Illinois, we have a lot of protections for survivors of domestic violence. So just wanted to take a few minutes and kind of talk about them specifically. Like, you know, we know that domestic violence affects how you show up in the world and how you work and what you're able to do. And so, Lindsay, can you tell us just a little bit about the protections for survivors and their workplace and employers?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the great things that exists for survivors is something called VESA, which is the Victims Economic Safety and Security Act. Mm-hmm. In other words, what this act does is recognize that domestic violence survivors need their livelihood. They need financial support from themselves in order to sometimes get out of these abusive situations. So VESA says that employers have to respect that you're a victim of domestic violence. They can't fire you simply for being a victim of a crime. I know that a lot of people say, I missed work 2 days last week because he took my car keys and he wouldn't let me leave the house, and then he hit my face and I was embarrassed to come to work like that. Well, that's not fair that a survivor be punished for something that is outside of his or her control in the workplace. So VESA could actually prevent you from losing your job, and at the same time, it gives you the opportunity to take leave from your job if you need to seek medical services related to abuse, counseling services, or even come stay at a shelter or talk to a place like the Violence Prevention Center.
And that is one thing that you guys as legal advocates can help through, right? Like, because that's all confusing and overwhelming. You can help give a survivor the tools to navigate those kind of laws to protect their employment, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. The thing is, nobody is born knowing this information. So it's our job to make sure that in a time of crisis, a survivor can focus on safety, but we can help focus on some of those other things like your job or your apartment to help make sure that you are safe, but you're also able to keep your livelihood and keep your children fed. So we're here to help with that.
That's awesome. Another thing that we hear pretty frequently are in some of our communities, there are rental property laws. Like if the police come to your property too many times, you'll get booted or evicted. And so most immediately, sometimes that stops a survivor from calling in the moment to get help. And then it leads to fear around calling again. Can you talk about the protections around your like landlord or property?
Yeah, absolutely. I hear that so much, the 3 times and you're out rule, 3 strikes and you're out. That's kind of what people believe, is that if you call the police 3 times in an apartment, then you're gonna get kicked out. And so like you said, that can keep survivors from calling if they're in an abusive crisis, somebody's actively hurting them. It could keep them from calling the police and getting medical attention or police attention. So there are laws in place to protect renters who are in these situations. One of them is called the Safe Homes Act, but what's important about that act is basically just that people can, if they are suffering from abuse, possibly get out of their lease early to relocate to a safe place, an undisclosed location. They can get locks changed, and they're able to contact the police for assistance when they need assistance without fear of losing their housing. And another great thing we offer at the Violence Prevention Center on the legal team is advocacy with local housing authorities. So if you ever have questions about your rights, or if you know someone who's in this situation, I would encourage you to just give us a call, because we can work closely with those authorities to try to help them understand the situation that person may be in.
Yeah, I think that's really great, because you don't have to stay in a home. Like, you just don't have to be fearful. We can help you through that. And then another huge source of fear that people have, and that we hear people talk about a lot, is what happens when an abuser gets visitation. Like, obviously there's a lot of back and forth, and how do we help people navigate through that?
Yeah, unfortunately, that is one difficult aspect, undeniably, about abusive or unhealthy partnerships, is even if you're able to leave the situation, you may still have to talk to that person about visitation. And judges may issue visitation to a person who has abused you, unfortunately. So on the legal team, we try to work very closely with the judges at the courthouse, and we try to advocate with attorneys to make sure that if visitation is a necessity, how do we do that safely? How do we make sure that our clients are able to go through the visitation process without being put in danger, without the child being exposed to violence and having to witness violence? There are safe ways to do it. There's a lot of safe ways to do it. And that's one thing I'm always excited to help people figure out and navigate. There's a ton of options there. And if something's not working for you with the visitation, we can try to change the way things are going to make it safer.
That's really awesome. So, Kaylin, I wanted to kind of shift focus just a tad and talk about the Hispanic community and the special considerations. So we here at the agency are committed to everyone being treated with respect and everyone being safe. And so, we have a Hispanic program, and I just wanted to talk to you. If you had one thing to say about the Hispanic population and domestic violence inside of it, what would you love everyone to know?
I would love everyone to know that abuse is a crime, and you have a right to a safe and healthy environment and relationship, and that's no matter what your status is at all.
Yeah. And so, I think immigrant and refugee populations are just, they have different vulnerabilities than the rest of the population. And can you speak just a little bit for those that are watching and maybe don't realize that they have special considerations? Like what would those be?
Well, the first one is mostly the huge language barrier that there is between only Spanish speaking victims and any kind of resources for help. So if there's not a Spanish speaking advocate for them, you know, in the police that respond to it, or in the courthouse to help them with those protections, or in agencies like this, it can be really hard for them to reach out and find help. And that even makes them a little fearful to report, because it's more difficult to do so. And so they report way less. They don't want to get in trouble. They don't want to get their abuser in trouble sometimes. And there's a lot more vulnerabilities to undocumented immigrants as well than our regular clients, because they're so afraid of their, you know, lack of status and their abuser using that against them. I think that's another huge one that we see.
And so what, like if they didn't have status, or maybe they're being, you know, coerced, or like what protections do we have in place, or that we can utilize to protect those populations that maybe struggle with reaching out?
There are actually some solutions and some avenues that are specifically made for victims of crimes like domestic violence that would protect them and, you know, eventually protect their status as well. They could get work authorization and things like that, while also keeping themselves safe from that abuser. And I work a lot with clients that are interested in those, and I explain those processes with them and help them along the way to make them see that it is a possibility for them to be safe and to protect their status.
Yeah, I think that's really great. So if somebody was watching this right now and maybe they know or love a Hispanic person that is experiencing domestic violence, how can they help or get involved with you? Like what would that look like? How does help get to them?
So if they do have, like I said earlier, if they do have somebody trusted they can talk to, that's always a good first step. If they need to go further with that and need more guidance and advocacy for themselves and their situations, or for someone they love that they know is going through that, I am available to help with that. They can first call the hotline and try to communicate that way. If they really don't speak enough English to be referred to me through the hotline, my phone number is posted on our Spanish landing page. It's, you know, vpcswi.org/espanol, and that's completely in Spanish. There's it explains all of our services in Spanish, as my picture, and my number and information on there that people can call, and we can just start from there and figure out what the next best step is for you and your family or your safety.
Yeah, I think the biggest takeaway for me from all of these conversations, whether it's in the Hispanic or legal or shelter or any of these that we've talked about, is that you can call us at any time and just hear your options, right? No one is going to tell you what to do. We're not going to demand things of you. We're just here to let you know what options are available, and then you get to make up your own mind. So like calling here is a great first step, right? So we've just spent the last 25 minutes or so with a lot of information, and sometimes a lot of heavy information. Lindsay, if you had the attention of the world, right, and could tell people one thing about survivors, what would it be?
It's hard to just think of one thing, but just one thing about survivors that I've learned is that they can be, obviously, any one of us. Any of us could be in an abusive situation, and it could be anyone of any gender, including men, women, children, boys and girls, older people and younger people. It affects all of us, our teenagers. And the amazing thing about survivors is their incredible resiliency. They can make it through horrific situations that a lot of us couldn't even imagine, and still be able to reach out to us and in some cases rebuild their lives. And that is really what we're here to do. Help with whatever their vision of their future is, help them build to that. We want to empower them to get to their best future and their best version of themselves.
Yeah, I don't know that anything better could actually be said, but I'm gonna, Kaylin, do you want to try?
Okay, rude, Melissa. I mean, I was gonna say kind of the same thing. We're always here to empower our clients and our survivors, but I would say to any, any person that might be going through this or know someone that's going through it, it's just the biggest thing is to be your own biggest advocate, because nobody knows your situation better than you. Nobody can keep yourself safe and keep your best interests in mind as you would. Sometimes you need a little help, but that's what we're here for. And every single person, no matter who they are or what they're going through, deserves to have that safety and to do that, because they matter and they're all worth all of this advocacy, all the advocacy that they could need.
Yeah, we have a great staff here that's ready and able to help. And I'm really excited for some of the awareness we've been bringing throughout all of October. I'm looking forward to next week's chat. We have 2 more of these scheduled every Thursday at 11:30. We've promised to keep them under a half hour so that we're not taking up all of your lunch hour. So we're going to go ahead and say goodbye, but thanks for listening. And I really appreciate Lindsay and Kaylin, you guys taking the time to chat with us today. And we're here if you need us. Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Thanks.